Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into the sands of ancient Egypt. No passports, no sunscreen, just soft candlelight and a few thousand years of architectural overachievement. You trudge through the cool twilight dunes and there it is, the Great Pyramid. Tall, stubborn, pointy. It looks like it's been here forever, and somehow it still doesn't want to tell you why. You step closer. Its limestone blocks shimmer faintly, as if catching some ancient light left behind by the stars. There's no entrance sign, no velvet rope, not even a do not enter plaque. Just wall. It's oddly elegant for something made entirely of rocks. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk with slow footsteps, the sand giving way under your weight like a soft mattress made of history. The stars above you are unusually bright tonight, like they've been waiting millennia for this conversation. The desert wind hums low if you listen carefully. It sounds suspiciously like it's whispering. They never figured it out. The first thing that hits you, besides sand in your sandal, is the sheer size. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands over 480 feet tall when freshly completed. Though a few stone layers have chipped away with time, it used to be covered in polished white casing stones that gleamed in the sun so brightly you probably could have roasted a marshmallow off the glare. Now it's a little more rugged, weathered, a bit like your favorite hoodie, less flashy, more been through stuff. You might ask, why a triangle, though? What's the deal with that shape? Well, there are theories. Some say it points to the sun, others say it channels spiritual energy, and a few modern thinkers just say, well, triangles are hard to knock over. Which honestly checks out. Historians still argue whether the shape was chosen for religious symbolism, astronomical alignment, or just because it looked cool and was difficult to rob. And speaking of robbing, yes, these fancy tombs didn't exactly keep out the ancient Egyptian equivalent of Ocean's 11. The more elaborate the design, the more determined the grave robbers. But more on that later. You pause and notice the quiet. This isn't the kind of silence you get in a bedroom or a library. It's deeper, timeless. A silence that once carried prayers in ancient tongue, cartloads of stone, and the weight of eternity. Now imagine being an architect in 2600 BCE. You've got no calculators, no coffee, and your client, who just happens to be the living incarnation of a god, is asking for a really big triangle made of 2 million limestone blocks, and you, for some reason, say yes. The logistics alone are enough to make you want to nap forever. Stones weighing 215 tons, dragged across miles of desert, shaped by copper tools, all aligned so perfectly you couldn't slide a papyrus sheet between them. It's like trying to build IKEA furniture without the manual, screws, or the will to live, but somehow it worked. And here's a fun little mystery snack for your sleepy brain. Despite all the grandeur, we still don't know exactly how they did it. No blueprint, no diary entry from the foreman saying, "Today I yelled at 2,000 guys because the ramp collapsed again." Just speculation and a lot of grain-based diets. Some say they used straight ramps, others say spiral ones. A few suggest aliens. But we're going to politely set that theory down for a nap of its own. The more you read, the more you realize that the greatest wonder about these wonders is not what we know, but what we don't. The night air around you is cool now, and a breeze swirls gently through your clothes. You sit on a rock warmed from the day's sun and look up at the sheer face of the pyramid. It doesn't ask for admiration, it expects it, and yet in its 1,000-ton silence there's an odd humility, as if it's saying, I was never meant to be understood. I was meant to be remembered. You reach into your satchel and take out a crumbly piece of dried date, not because you're hungry, just to feel like you belong. And in that quiet under the endless stars, with the crunch of sand beneath your boots and the pyramid, watching you like a mildly judgmental grandfather, you feel it, not fear, not awe, but a peculiar comfort. Here, where stone meets sky, And question meets echo. It's okay not to understand. It's okay to just listen. The air is still, and somewhere in the dark a jackal yawns. You stretch your legs and begin walking again, circling the pyramid's base like a tiny moon orbiting a sleeping colossus. The limestone blocks feel even larger now up close, each one like a silent chapter in a very heavy book no one can read. You can't help but wonder, what kind of person decided that upon death they deserved not just a decent burial plot, but a mathematically precise, labor-intensive skyscraper made of rock? Welcome to the world of the pharaohs, where dying in style was a competitive sport. In ancient Egypt, a pharaoh wasn't just a king, he was a god in a headdress, a divine CEO of the Nile, and apparently, being a god came with serious afterlife. FOMO. You couldn't just keel over and call it a day. No, you needed eternal provisions, golden furniture, soul navigation manuals, and ideally, a massive stone triangle to house your glorified storage locker. The first pharaohs started modestly. Mud brick tombs, shallow pits, the ancient equivalent of starter homes. But as dynasties rolled on, things escalated fast. You know how each generation of smartphones gets more complicated and unnecessary? Yeah, that, but with tombs. Snefru, let's talk about him for a moment. He ruled around 600 BCE, and was the kind of ruler who probably never said that's good enough. He built not one, not two, but at least 3 pyramids, because apparently practice makes perfect even in death planning. His first attempt was the Maidum Pyramid, which started as a step pyramid but was later smoothed over, sort of like slapping frosting on a lopsided cake. Unfortunately, parts of it collapsed. Oops. Then came the bent pyramid at Dashur, where midway through construction, the angle shifts dramatically, probably because someone did the math, gasped, and said, boss? Finally, Snefru's crowning jewel, the Red Pyramid. Tall, sleek, elegant. He got it right. And future pharaohs clapped politely and said, yes, that'll do. Historians still argue whether Snefru really intended to build that many, or if he just had commitment issues. But either way, he laid the groundwork, literally, for what would come next. The Great Pyramid of Giza. Now imagine you're Khufu, Snefru's son. Your dad just perfected the pyramid. Naturally, you have to go bigger, bolder, with better interior lighting. Okay, maybe not that last part. So Khufu orders a project of insane ambition, a pyramid that would stand as the tallest structure on Earth for over 3,800 years. Let that sink in. No steel, no cranes, just thousands of workers, copper chisels, and sheer stubbornness. But what was the point of this escalating grandeur? Was it legacy, vanity, afterlife logistics? Most likely a bit of everything. See, in ancient Egyptian belief, death wasn't the end. It was an extended journey requiring detailed preparation. The tomb was not just a grave. It was an eternal residence, complete with all your favorite things and complicated hallway systems to confuse your spiritual burglars. And so the pyramid became more than a monument. It became a message. I was here. I mattered. Don't forget me. A literal mountain of memory. And in Pharaoh Khufu's case, boy, did he make it hard to forget. But here's the twist that makes you squint in amused disbelief. Despite their grandeur, many of these royal pyramids didn't actually safeguard the pharaoh's body. Looted, emptied, ransacked. Some were even left unfinished, or mysteriously empty from the start. So all that effort, those years of labor, those cartloads of granite, that precise celestial alignment might have ultimately served as the world's most elaborate do not disturb sign that absolutely everyone ignored. You lean against a weather-worn block and feel the faint heat still stored in the stone from the afternoon sun. The breeze has picked up, carrying with it the ancient perfume of sand and distant myrrh. You imagine the workers, sunburned, hungry, probably wondering why they were building a tomb, taller than a lighthouse for someone who wouldn't even wave thanks. And yet there's something touching in that absurdity. A civilization so obsessed with eternity that it shaped its entire landscape into reminders. A king so afraid of being forgotten that he conscripted heaven and earth into a monument. You shift your gaze upward. The slope of the pyramid catches moonlight like a blade, and for a moment it almost looks like it's floating, as if it's not made of stone but of ambition and fear, and the hope that someone someday, maybe you, would still be looking up. Your feet crunch softly on the sand as you wander further into this stony time capsule, and you find yourself drawn into the strange, almost comedic biography of Pharaoh Snefru, the man who turned pyramid building into a trial and error hobby. Now, here's the thing about Snefru. He may have been a king, but you get the sense he would have made an excellent perfectionist architect, or perhaps an indecisive interior designer. The man could not settle on a single pyramid. It was as if he ordered one, stood back, squinted, and said, bit lopsided. Build another. The first of his great undertakings was the Maidam Pyramid. It started as a step pyramid, a bit like a wedding cake with ambitions. Then, halfway through, someone had the idea to smooth the sides and turn it into a true pyramid. Great idea, except it partially collapsed, possibly even during construction, leaving behind what locals now refer to, somewhat unflatteringly, as the collapsed pyramid. Imagine making your eternal tomb, and then having to be buried elsewhere because the walls gave out. Bit awkward, but Snefru was undeterred. On to the next. Enter the bent pyramid. This one is a gem. Its base rises at a steep angle, too steep as it turns out. Partway up, the builders panicked, or finally read a physics scroll, and abruptly changed the angle, giving the structure a charmingly awkward, bent appearance. It looks a bit like it's hunched over from all the responsibility of being an architectural guinea pig. Scholars believe they feared another collapse, and to their credit, it's still standing today. A glorious monument to mid-project improvisation. Historians still argue whether this change in angle was a moment of sudden engineering brilliance or a collective from the royal building crew. Either way, it's delightful to imagine the foreman wiping his brow and muttering, "Let's just angle it down. Maybe no one will notice." But third time's the charm. Snefru's final known project was the Red Pyramid, named for the pinkish hue of its stone. It was sleek, solid, and structurally sound. No collapsing, no bending, just a proper pyramid, thank you very much. It stands today as Egypt's first successful attempt at a smooth-sided pyramid, and Snefru's crowning achievement, assuming, of course, that he wasn't already embarrassed by the earlier two. You walk a little closer, imagining Snefru pacing outside each construction site, clipboard in hand, or more likely a gilded staff, critiquing the angle of each block. It's comforting somehow to know that even divine kings had a learning curve. Immortality might be promised in the afterlife, but first, you had to survive the logistics of ancient construction. But here's what makes Snefru fascinating. Not just the buildings themselves, but the fact that he seemed to care deeply about perfecting them. It wasn't enough to be buried. He wanted to be housed eternally in a structure that spoke of order, permanence, and probably a bit of royal flair. And the ripple effect of his obsession? Monumental, literally. His son Khufu would take these experiments and say, "Let's go even bigger." Without Snefru's failures, we might never have had the Great Pyramid. His missteps paved the way, steeply and sometimes crookedly, for the glory to come. You step back and gaze again at the outline of these ancient constructions, the way their silhouettes break the horizon like mountain peaks invented by humans. You wonder about the builders, tens of thousands of workers laboring for years, carving, hauling, sweating beneath the desert sun, all to make someone else's dream of eternal rest come true. And we call them tombs. But in truth, these were stage sets for immortality. The pyramid wasn't just a place to store a body. It was a symbol, a statement that death wasn't the end, merely a doorway. And behind that doorway, well, you'd better have the fanciest foyer imaginable. You sit on a stone block worn smooth by centuries of wind and sun. The air is cool now, dusk settling in, and the limestone glows faintly, as if warmed by the memory of gods long departed. In the stillness, you picture Snefru himself, not as a god king, but as a man trying to get it right, puzzling over his own mortality with the tools he had: geometry, ambition, and enough manpower to build a city from rock. Not every project goes to plan. Some fall down, some bend, but in the end, the pyramids didn't need perfection to become eternal. They just needed someone to try. As you trudge deeper into the sands of time, the silhouettes of the Great Pyramids at Giza loom into view, slicing the twilight horizon like divine geometry etched against the sky. You tilt your head, squinting at the precision of those angles, and suddenly feel like your high school math teacher owes these guys a tip of the hat. This is where the pyramid truly became an Olympic sport in engineering, where it stopped being just a monument and started becoming an obsession. Because building a giant triangle from limestone is one thing. Building one that still stands, aligned with cosmic precision, 4,500 years later, that's a flex. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, the most massive of the bunch, wasn't just big. It was big and mathematically smug. Nearly 147 meters tall when finished. It's a bit shorter now, like most of us with age. It was the tallest man-made structure in the world for over 3,800 years. Imagine that. Every skyscraper you know today, Khufu's pyramid beat them to it. And without steel cranes or project managers in neon vests. What's even more astounding is its alignment. The pyramid's sides are oriented to the cardinal directions with astonishing precision, within a fraction of a degree. North, south, east, west, boom. Even today, with GPS and satellites, we'd be hard-pressed to do it better while also balancing a workforce of thousands who are, let's be honest, probably getting paid in bread and onions. Historians still argue whether this precision was achieved using the stars, the sun's shadow, or maybe a very enthusiastic group of surveyors with nothing better to do. Theories abound. Some suggest a line of sight to the pole star. Others argue the equinox was their cheat sheet. And then there's always the possibility they just had some brilliant guy with a really straight stick. But geometry wasn't just for show. The pyramid's proportions appear to echo some mathematical curiosities. For example, if you take the perimeter of the Great Pyramid and divide it by its height, you get a number eerily close to 2p. That's right, circles from triangles. Some think it's a coincidence. Others whisper that the ancient Egyptians knew about pi long before the Greeks got their olive-stained hands on it. Now imagine you're standing there, watching workers haul multi-ton stones up a gently sloped ramp, all under the watchful eye of architects scribbling on papyrus, muttering, "It's all about the base." And the cosine angle. It's not just construction, it's a statement of cosmic order. In a world full of chaos, floods, famine, crocodiles, the pyramid was a shape that said, "Here things make sense." And while the inside might feel like a claustrophobic hike through stone tunnels that tilt it mildly, rude angles, the outside remains a masterpiece of clean design. Originally, the pyramid was covered in smooth white Tura limestone casing stones, polished so brightly that sunlight would reflect off the faces like mirrors. People as far as 100 kilometers away could spot the shimmer. It was a lighthouse for the afterlife, a gleaming triangle telling the world, the king still shines. Unfortunately, most of those outer stones were looted over the centuries, turned into mosques, forts, and some very old, probably drafty buildings in Cairo. But if you look closely, at the very base of the pyramid, a few polished casing stones remain, gleaming faintly like teeth in an ancient jaw. You sit on the sand, knees pulled in, imagining the pyramid in its prime, so white it glowed by day, so precisely aligned it mirrored the heavens, and so large it whispered, "Death is not the end." Also, look how pointy I am. But here's the irony. For all their grandeur, the pyramids weren't built to be seen from the inside. The burial chambers are small, plain, tucked away deep in the heart of all that geometry. It's as if the entire structure was a decoy, a cosmic camouflage to confuse thieves, distract mortals, and maybe impress a few gods. Even stranger, we don't actually know exactly how they did it. Yes, we've got reasonable theories. Straight ramps, spiral ramps, Counterweights, human determination, but the blueprints are gone. What survives is rock, awe, and a whole lot of speculation. And that's the beauty of it. You're not just looking at stone. You're looking at a puzzle. One whose pieces are too big to carry, too heavy to lift, and too perfect to dismiss. A structure built not only to preserve a body, but to preserve mystery itself. So you exhale into the quiet evening, the breeze rustling across the dunes like a page being turned. Somewhere a jackal calls in the distance. The pyramid remains unmoved, unbothered, and frankly a little smug. Because long after names are forgotten and empires have turned to dust, geometry, it seems, is forever. You're standing at the foot of Khafre's pyramid now, slightly smaller than Khufu's, but still enormous. And honestly, at this point, size is hardly the issue. You're not here to measure. You're here to find the front door. Except plot twist, there isn't one. Or at least not where you'd expect it. See, one of the oldest and most entertaining mysteries of the pyramids is, where's the entrance? Because these monuments to eternity weren't exactly designed with visitors in mind. No welcome mats, no maps, no glowing neon enter here signs. Just acres of solid stone. And somewhere hidden within, a tiny little passageway leading to a king. Maybe. Probably. Okay, we're not even sure who's buried in some of these. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. The original entrances were often placed high up. Sometimes 10 or 15 meters above ground. Why, scholars think it was to discourage tomb robbers, because nothing says don't steal my stuff like needing a ladder and a degree in claustrophobia to even get inside. Historians still argue whether the doorways were deliberately obscured with plaster and limestone, or if they were simply too high to be noticed for centuries. Either way, most modern visitors enter through robber tunnels, hastily carved, centuries-old detours chiseled by grave robbers, who apparently lacked respect but made up for it with tenacity and pickaxes. Let's imagine you're one of those ancient intruders. You've heard there's treasure inside. Maybe gold. Maybe sacred relics. Maybe something you can trade for a new camel. So you scale the side of a massive pyramid. No easy feat, pry open some rocks, and squeeze through a space barely wide enough for your ego. What awaits? A long descending corridor that goes way deeper than your comfort level. The Grand Gallery of the Great Pyramid is a feat of architecture even by today's standards. Sloped at 26 degrees, stretching up 8 meters high and over 45 meters long, it looks more like the inside of a spaceship than a tomb. Smooth walls, corbelled ceiling, echoing silence. It's the kind of place where your breath feels like a trespass, and it leads eventually to the king's chamber, a stark granite room with an empty sarcophagus and an overwhelming air of this better not be haunted. But here's the kicker. The king's chamber wasn't just built, it was hidden. Above it are 5 so-called relieving chambers, filled with massive granite blocks meant to keep the ceiling from collapsing. And scrawled on those blocks, ancient workers' graffiti, crew of the Friends of Khufu, and similar scribbles. That's right. Even pyramid builders left notes, and probably got yelled at for writing on the granite. But even that chamber wasn't the only one. Below it lies the mysterious unfinished chamber, carved into the bedrock as if the architects just gave up halfway. Above it all, there's the Queen's Chamber, which, spoiler alert, has no queen. Egyptologists still debate what it was for. Maybe a spirit chamber? Maybe a decoy? Maybe just storage for Pharaoh's winter sandals. More recently, in 2017, scientists discovered a new void inside the Great Pyramid, using muon tomography, which sounds like Star Trek science, but is basically cosmic rays detecting empty spaces. The new chamber is 30 meters long and nobody knows what's inside. Could be another tomb. Could be a hidden stash of papyrus. Could be nothing, which for pyramid fans is still something. And that's the point. These aren't tombs like we imagine. They're puzzles. Deliberate labyrinths of false doors, dead-end corridors, and hidden chambers meant to fool both thieves and time. A pharaoh's afterlife was serious business, and protecting his mummy required more misdirection than a Las Vegas magician. In fact, many pyramids went so far as to install portcullis blocks, Giant slabs of stone dropped into place to seal passages after burial. Picture a trapdoor, but make it weigh several tons. Once that rock slid into place, that was it. Game over, nobody in, nobody out. So standing there under a pale Egyptian moon, you realize something odd. The pyramid isn't just hiding a body, it's performing secrecy. Every layer is part of a script, rehearsed by architects, engineers, priests, and masons, all conspiring to build a monument that would not just awe but mystify. And it worked. Thousands of years later, we're still looking for the front door. You brush your fingers along the cool stone. Somewhere inside there might still be untouched chambers, unopened doors, pharaohs waiting to be found, or maybe cleverly avoided ever being found in the first place. It's hard to say. That's the thing about mysteries. The best ones don't just hide answers. They make the questions last forever. You're standing at the foot of Khafre's pyramid now. Slightly smaller than Khufu's, but still enormous. And honestly, at this point, size is hardly the issue. You're not here to measure. You're here to find the front door. Except plot twist, there isn't one. Or at least not where you'd expect it. See, one of the oldest and most entertaining mysteries of the pyramids is, where's the entrance? Because these monuments to eternity weren't exactly designed with visitors in mind. No welcome mats, no maps, no glowing neon enter here signs. Just acres of solid stone. And somewhere hidden within, a tiny little passageway leading to a king. Maybe. Probably. Okay, we're not even sure who's buried in some of these. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. The original entrances were often placed high up. Sometimes 10 or 15 meters above ground. Why? Scholars think it was to discourage tomb robbers. Because nothing says don't steal my stuff like needing a ladder and a degree in claustrophobia to even get inside. Historians still argue whether the doorways were deliberately obscured with plaster and limestone, or if they were simply too high to be noticed for centuries. Either way, most modern visitors enter through robber tunnels, hastily carved, centuries-old detours chiseled by grave robbers, who apparently lacked respect but made up for it with tenacity and pickaxes. Let's imagine you're one of those ancient intruders. You've heard there's treasure inside. Maybe gold. Maybe sacred relics. Maybe something you can trade for a new camel. So you scale the side of a massive pyramid. No easy feat, pry open some rocks, and squeeze through a space barely wide enough for your ego. What awaits? A long descending corridor that goes way deeper than your comfort level. The Grand Gallery of the Great Pyramid is a feat of architecture even by today's standards. Sloped at 26 degrees, stretching up 8 meters high and over 45 meters long, it looks more like the inside of a spaceship than a tomb. Smooth walls, corbelled ceiling, echoing silence. It's the kind of place where your breath feels like a trespass, and it leads eventually to the king's chamber, a stark granite room with an empty sarcophagus and an overwhelming air of this better not be haunted. But here's the kicker. The king's chamber wasn't just built, it was hidden. Above it are 5 so-called relieving chambers, filled with massive granite blocks meant to keep the ceiling from collapsing. And scrawled on those blocks, ancient workers' graffiti, crew of the Friends of Khufu, and similar scribbles. That's right, even pyramid builders left notes, and probably got yelled at for writing on the granite. But even that chamber wasn't the only one. Below it lies the mysterious unfinished chamber, carved into the bedrock as if the architects just gave up halfway. Above it all, there's the Queen's Chamber, which, spoiler alert, has no queen. Egyptologists still debate what it was for. Maybe a spirit chamber? Maybe a decoy? Maybe just storage for Pharaoh's winter sandals. More recently, in 2017, scientists discovered a new void inside the Great Pyramid, using muon tomography, which sounds like Star Trek science, but is basically cosmic rays detecting empty spaces. The new chamber is 30 meters long and nobody knows what's inside. Could be another tomb. Could be a hidden stash of papyrus. Could be nothing, which for pyramid fans is still something. And that's the point. These aren't tombs like we imagine. They're puzzles. Deliberate labyrinths of false doors, dead-end corridors, and hidden chambers meant to fool both thieves and time. A pharaoh's afterlife was serious business, and protecting his mummy required more misdirection than a Las Vegas magician. In fact, many pyramids went so far as to install portcullis blocks, giant slabs of stone dropped into place to seal passages after burial. Picture a trapdoor, but make it weigh several tons. Once that rock slid into place, that was it. Game over, nobody in, nobody out. So standing there under a pale Egyptian moon, you realize something odd. The pyramid isn't just hiding a body, it's performing secrecy. Every layer is part of a script, rehearsed by architects, engineers, priests, and masons, all conspiring to build a monument that would not just awe but mystify. And it worked. Thousands of years later, we're still looking for the front door. You brush your fingers along the cool stone. Somewhere inside there might still be untouched chambers, unopened doors, pharaohs waiting to be found, or maybe cleverly avoided ever being found in the first place. It's hard to say. That's the thing about mysteries. The best ones don't just hide answers. They make the questions last forever. You duck down under a sandstone lintel and step into the past, literally. The air changes. Cooler, quieter. Dust motes float in the light of your flickering torch, and the walls narrow around you. You're in the belly of a pyramid now, and it smells like old stone and older secrets. The walls were built to last millennia. And the blocks? Let's just say nobody was skimping on materials. Some weigh up to 80 tons. Yes, tons with a T. And the ancient Egyptians didn't have cranes, forklifts, or 3D printed limestone. They had rope, levers, ramps, and what we can only assume was an unlimited budget of elbow grease. Historians still argue whether straight ramps, zigzagging switchbacks, or circular spiral ramps were used to drag these blocks into place, and none of the models are easy. The construction effort would have involved thousands of workers over decades. Think full-time job with overtime, every day for your entire adult life, with sand in your sandals, and no coffee. The logistics alone make your head spin. Organizing materials, feeding the laborers, scheduling hauling shifts. This wasn't just about stacking rocks. It was an industrial operation, centuries before the Industrial Revolution. And that makes you pause, because these weren't just tombs. They were statements, power statements, eternal resumes in limestone. Let's rewind a little. Early pyramid builders used mud brick and layered stone. It was fine. Until Pharaoh Djoser decided, what if we built up? His vizier, Imhotep, yes. That Imhotep, the one later turned into a mummy villain in Hollywood, stacked 6 mastabas, those flat rectangular tombs, into what we now call the Step Pyramid at Saqqara. It looked like a ziggurat crossed with a wedding cake, and it changed everything. Now everyone wanted to build higher, but building higher wasn't easy. When Snefer, remember him? Pharaoh with a thing for real estate, tried it. His first attempt collapsed. His second, the bent pyramid, got halfway up and developed a suspicious lean. It still stands today like it's shrugging at you. Finally, he nailed it with the red pyramid. An elegant, perfect shape that made later pyramids possible. By the time of Khufu, pyramid building had become an obsession. And so the Great Pyramid rose, 146 meters high at the time, with over 2 million blocks. Imagine hauling that many stones without dropping your chisel. Here's a fun fact. The blocks weren't all the same size. The ones at the base were massive, and they gradually decreased in size the higher you went. Smart move. Keeps the structure stable and your workers slightly less homicidal. But this was more than architecture. It was a cosmic project. The alignment of the pyramids with the cardinal directions is so precise. Some scholars have called it astronomically absurd. North is north to a fraction of a degree. They didn't just build, they calibrated. The site at Giza also mirrors the belt of Orion in some theories, suggesting that the pyramids weren't just tombs. They were star maps, celestial machines, or maybe even giant launch pads to the afterlife. The pyramid's internal passageways also reflect this attention to detail. Angled shafts point toward certain stars. The Grand Gallery is proportioned with a kind of obsessive geometry. You wonder who was all this precision for. It wasn't for tourists. It wasn't even for the priests. It was for gods. Or perhaps for time itself. And while we often imagine slaves toiling under the whip, modern research suggests many pyramid builders were skilled laborers, possibly conscripted but not enslaved, fed beer, onions, and bread. Their tombs have been found nearby, decorated with pride. Pyramid builder pride. Imagine being so proud of your construction job. You wanted to be buried next to your work. Now that's job satisfaction. So yes, the pyramids were expensive. Ridiculously so. And all to bury one man, his treasures, and maybe his cat. But in the grand scheme, these projects weren't wasteful. They were investments into legacy, into ideology, into the afterlife. And the pain, the sheer physical labor was part of the point. Every block was a prayer. Every sweat-drenched hour another brick in the pharaoh's immortality. The process itself was sacred, holy, brutal, beautiful. It's quiet down here, deep in the corridor. You rest against a wall smoothed by forgotten hands, and you can almost hear the echo of ancient hammers, the rumble of sleds dragging stone across the sand, the quiet chant of workers sinking their pulls. All of it just so that no one could say, "Hey, this tomb was a bit small." You step out of the tunnel just long enough to blink into the desert sun, and then duck again into the cooler shadows of yet another tomb. But this one isn't pristine. The walls are chipped. A stone panel lies askew. There's a faded red smear that might once have warned looters, or maybe just bled from the hand of one, because if you're going to build the fanciest, tallest, most over-engineered structure in the ancient world, you're going to attract attention. Welcome to the golden age of tomb robbing. The pyramids, for all their brilliance, had one tiny flaw. They were really, really obvious. A monument to secrecy, the size of a mountain. Whoops. Historians still argue whether tomb robbers were mostly external criminals or disgruntled insiders. Probably both. Some were villagers driven by poverty. Others were workers who knew the floor plans. And occasionally it was pharaohs themselves, raiding the treasures of ancestors to fund their own afterlife bling. Recycling, but make it divine. You pause beside a broken seal. Once it would have been stamped with the pharaoh's name, a symbol of sacred protection. Now it hangs loose like an old lock after a break-in. You picture the scene, a moonlit night, whispers echoing in the sand, pickaxes wrapped in cloth to muffle the sound. They came for gold, for lapis lazuli, for incense, statues, games, and sometimes just grain. Tombs were treasure troves of everything a pharaoh might need in the next world, meaning they were awfully useful in this one, and no matter how cleverly the architects hid the entrances, blocked shafts, false doors, trap passages, the robbers found a way. Ancient graffiti in some tombs boasts of what they stole and how fast. One even left a note. "We found nothing. Only a few broken jars. Waste of time. Some things never change." The response? Pharaohs started getting nervous. And clever. Later, pyramids shrank in size but grew in trickery. Tombs were dug deeper, angled sharply, or relocated entirely to valleys, cliffs, or hidden shafts. The Valley of the Kings? A tactical retreat from please rob me monuments. But by then, the damage was done. Most of the Old Kingdom pyramids were looted within a few generations. Even Khufu's Great Pyramid, despite its scale, was found empty. No sarcophagus, no treasures, no hieroglyphs proudly declaring, "Here lies the God King." Just silence. And that silence speaks volumes. It speaks of a civilization grappling with its own fragility, of priests drafting new spells to ward off desecration, of architects designing decoys within decoys, of people who believe so strongly in immortality they couldn't bear to let it be stolen, but also of reality. Even gods can't guard their graves forever. Let's not forget the sandstorms. Natural forces sometimes buried entrances or collapsed corridors, adding confusion to protection. One tomb was found completely sealed, until someone noticed a faint swirl in the sand revealing a hidden air shaft. Cue archaeologist theme music. In this moment, standing amid the aftermath of robbery centuries past, You realize the pyramids aren't just tombs. They're cautionary tales. They warn of hubris, of the futility of permanence, of building fortresses for things that cannot be kept. But they also whisper resilience. Some things did survive. Statues too heavy to move, inscriptions too sacred to desecrate, and most of all, the stones themselves, layers of intention that outlasted the gold inside. It's oddly comforting. Even when emptied, the pyramid still stood. Even when looted, the tomb still told a story. Even now, with no one left who remembers the names firsthand, the echo of belief remains. You brush dust from a cartouche carved awkwardly but proudly. The name is half faded. You try to sound it out in your mind. Maybe it doesn't matter who exactly was buried here. Maybe the point was never just the burial. Maybe the pyramid was always meant to outlive its contents. A stage for memory, a canvas for mystery, a problem so elegant in its overthinking that people would keep pondering it. Thousands of years later, while listening to the crackle of a fake fireplace on YouTube, you step back out into the daylight, where sand continues to swirl in patient spirals around half-buried stones. The robbers may have taken the riches, but the mystery stayed. You follow a narrow passage, the ceiling lowering, the floor sloping like a lazy water slide to nowhere. The air grows stale and tight. You duck instinctively, even though no one's been buried here for thousands of years. Well, presumably. Welcome to the world of hidden chambers and architectural overkill. Imagine this, you're a royal architect. The pharaoh just told you he wants a tomb that absolutely no one can find. Also, it should impress the gods. Also, it should be earthquake-proof. Also, maybe make it align with the stars, just for flair. Oh, and don't go over budget. So what do? You design a monument with 30 fake hallways, 12 dead-end shafts, 4 angled corridors that lead nowhere, and one single hidden room buried somewhere in the middle. You stand back. You squint, you mutter, maybe that's enough? And then the pharaoh adds, let's make one of the ceilings weigh 70 tons. Because of course he does. You pass a corridor that seems like it should be important. It isn't, just another decoy. The ancient Egyptians were obsessed with misdirection. Some shafts end abruptly in rock. Some curve downward only to loop back up. Others are just deep enough to break your ankle, but never your spirit. Historians still debate whether these fake passages were spiritual, mazes, or just really paranoid construction decisions. The Great Pyramid of Khufu is the masterpiece of this madness. It contains the so-called Grand Gallery, a narrow, sloped corridor nearly 9 meters tall that leads upward like the neck of a stone swan. It's beautiful, it's mysterious, and it's probably a glorified hallway, because when you reach the so-called king's chamber, it's empty. No mummy, no treasure, just a big stone box, suspiciously oversized for any known coffin. Some argue it was symbolic, a spiritual chamber, not a practical one. Others think the real burial site is still undiscovered, tucked behind a wall or beneath the floor. In 2017, cosmic ray detectors revealed a previously unknown void above the Grand Gallery, a space no one can enter. Historians still argue whether it's a structural feature or an intentional room. The fact that we don't know only makes it more delicious. You duck beneath a low lintel and enter another corridor. This one, they say, was never meant to be found. It's angled steeply downward, almost like a tunnel to the underworld. And just when you expect to reach something dramatic, it stops. A flat wall. No markings. No hinges, no clues. Just silence. Maybe something is buried behind it. Maybe it's a red herring. Or maybe you're standing in the ancient Egyptian version of a 404 not found page, and yet you can't help but admire it. This is over-engineering with purpose. These people built illusions in stone. They carved fear into limestone. They turned architecture into myth. You sit on a stone ledge and imagine being a tomb robber again. You've snuck in. You've avoided curses, guards, collapsing roofs. You've made it this far. And now, wall. Just a wall. You knock. Hollow. You dig. Solid. You curse in ancient Egyptian. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the pyramid, the real tomb is laughing. There's a kind of poetry to it. The Egyptians weren't trying to make things impossible, just improbable. Enough tricks to wear you down, enough puzzles to make you doubt. And by the time you're close, you don't even know it. You look up. Above you, angled granite beams intersect in a complex V shape. They're part of the so-called relieving chambers meant to deflect the weight of the stones above. Or maybe they're not. Maybe they're just another excuse to confuse people. 4,500 years later, architects argue about this all the time. Some claim it's brilliant load distribution. Others think it's unnecessary flair. One fringe theory even suggests the shape was meant to resonate acoustically, like some kind of cosmic xylophone. You smile, sure, why not? It's easy to forget that the builders were people. Exhausted, dusty, probably annoyed at their supervisors. Some of the graffiti in unfinished chambers includes doodles, nicknames, or the ancient Egyptian equivalent of Kevin was here. You wonder how they felt, carving out rooms that would never be seen. It's possible that some of the most beautiful chambers in the pyramid are still sealed forever. Never looted, never explored, never lit again. Think about that, a perfect room, untouched by time, invisible to the world, still carrying the breath of the last person who stepped inside. Maybe that's the point. Not to be discovered, but to be imagined. You sit in silence for a while longer. The walls don't move. The air doesn't shift. But in your mind, 1,000 doors open leading into the unknown. This was never just a tomb. It was a message in stone. We were here. We mattered. And we built something too clever for even ourselves to understand. You stand up, brush dust from your knees, and continue. Somewhere deeper, another mystery waits. You descend again, your path narrowing into a tight ramp that creaks with ancient stillness. It's cooler here, like the pyramid itself is exhaling. And ahead the ceiling lowers further, as if testing your commitment. You're now entering the weirdly specific world of anti-tomb security. Because you see, the ancient Egyptians weren't just excellent at stacking rocks. They were also apparently the original inventors of booby traps, fake sarcophagi, and very dramatic overthinking. Imagine being a pharaoh. You just conquered a few nations, received a pile of tribute, and are now commissioning a tomb to house your mummified glory for eternity. And your biggest fear? That some guy named Hapu might tunnel in and swipe your favorite bracelet. So what do? You get devious. Some tombs included false burial chambers stocked with decoy treasures. Others had hidden doorways masked by stone blocks so seamless, even the wind didn't suspect them. There were vertical shafts, filled with loose rubble designed to collapse under a robber's feet, and occasionally someone would even carve an entire maze, leading nowhere. Historians still debate whether traps were real or merely architectural bluffs. No ancient pyramid yet discovered has offered definitive evidence of Indiana Jones-style swinging blades or arrow trigger tiles. But then again, would any thief have survived to report it? One of the more curious features? The portcullis blocks. Let's talk about those. In Khufu's Great Pyramid, deep within the so-called ascending passage, there are 3 massive granite slabs, stacked vertically like sliding doors. After the burial, they were lowered to seal off the king's chamber. You'd need centuries of elbow grease or divine chiseling to get through. Of course, the robbers still did. No matter how clever the system, no matter how obscure the route, tombs were almost always looted eventually, so the Egyptians kept upping the ante. By the Middle Kingdom, pharaohs began ditching visible pyramids altogether. They'd dig into remote hillsides, sculpt underground labyrinths, and pray their names stayed attached longer than their gold. Yet even then, grave robbing was so common it became its own economy. Entire crews worked for months in secret to access just one chamber. The idea of resting in peace? Mostly theoretical. You reach a dead end and double back. This passage is so narrow that you're forced to walk sideways. On the wall is a faint carving, a team of laborers, hauling a block as tall as a camel. They're smiling. Why? Maybe the artist liked irony. In the Valley of the Kings, used after the Pyramid era, the same mindset continued. Tombs of rulers like Seti I and Ramesses II were buried deep into mountain flanks, with misleading entrances and miles of false tunnels. They carved staircases that twisted like riddles and decorated ceilings with star maps so detailed, you'd wonder if the ancient Egyptians invented planetariums too. Still didn't stop the looters. There's something poetic about that. The eternal tug of war between protection and pursuit. For every ingenious sealing mechanism, there was a new pickaxe or bribe. But occasionally, just occasionally, something survived. In 1922, when Howard Carter and his team uncovered the sealed doorway to Tutankhamun's tomb, they weren't expecting much. The king was minor, his pyramid non-existent, and the tomb looked hastily finished. But inside, untouched treasure. Nested coffins. A dagger made from meteorite. Everything still in place. Why? Perhaps because the tomb was so modest that no one thought to bother. Or perhaps because someone had sealed the entrance with such ordinary perfection that it looked like nothing at all. The best camouflage, after all, is forgetfulness. And even when the tombs were looted, the pyramids remained. Robbers took the gold. Time took the paint. But the stone? The stone laughed. Back in your corridor, you stumble over a small step. You look down. It's just a worn-out edge, but for a moment it seemed like a trapdoor. Maybe your imagination is getting the best of you. Or maybe that's what the builders wanted. Because in the world of Egyptian tomb design, doubt was a feature, not a flaw. Every wrong turn was part of the show. Every silence? Suspicious. Every wall? A potential lie. And deep inside this giant puzzle, you begin to wonder if the point wasn't to stop robbers at all, but to turn death into a story. One told through tunnels, chambers, shafts, and shadows. A story you had to get lost in to understand. You place a hand on the wall. Cool limestone. Faint tool marks. The signature of someone who chiseled this stone by firelight 4,000 years ago. Never imagining your palm would rest here now. No alarms, no guardians, just stillness. But it feels like the pyramid is watching. You finally find your way back to a wider corridor, thankful for the extra shoulder room. The air is still thick with silence, though it hums faintly with age. The torchlight flickers along the walls, and somewhere far above, grains of sand whisper down between ancient seams. Outside, the pyramids are basking in starlight. Tour buses have gone. The camels are asleep, probably dreaming of fewer tourists. But during the day, oh, it's chaos. Let's talk about what happened after the Egyptians were finished with the pyramids, and the rest of the world got curious. Enter Napoleon Bonaparte. Yes, that guy. In 1798, Napoleon invaded Egypt because conquering countries was just his thing. But he didn't just bring soldiers. He brought scientists, surveyors, artists. Over 100 savants marched with him into the desert, eyes wide and notebooks ready. They weren't there to loot. They came to gawk. They measured, they drew. They poked every corner of the Great Pyramid. One of them even tried to climb it barefoot. He gave up halfway and wrote poetry instead. Historians still argue whether Napoleon's real goal was strategic military control or just showing off at dinner. Parties back in France, yes. I've been to Giza. The acoustics inside are marvelous. Soon after, Egyptomania swept Europe like a sandstorm in a gift shop. Obelisks popped up in Paris. Mummies appeared in British drawing rooms. People hosted unwrapping parties, where guests would gather to peel the linens off ancient corpses, usually while sipping sherry and pretending this wasn't deeply unsettling. And then came the travelers, 19th century adventurers, in pith helmets, posed dramatically in front of the pyramids, often with camels they'd just met. They carved their names on sacred walls, because why not immortalize yourself next to hieroglyphs that already beat you to it? By 3,000 years, one man, Giovanni Belzoni, former circus strongman turned archaeologist, lugged entire statues out of temples, sometimes with help from hundreds of Egyptian laborers, ropes, grease, and the occasional log-wheeled sledge. It was archaeology by muscle and mischief. Photographers soon followed. In the 1800s, You could get your portrait taken while sitting on top of the Great Pyramid. Not beside it. Not in front of it, on it. Guides would hoist you up for a fee, and you could sip tea with the horizon at your feet. It became a rite of passage for the European elite. Pyramid climbing. More fashionable than fencing lessons. More brag-worthy than knowing Latin. Of course, once the British arrived in force, everything got a little possessive. Egypt became a protectorate, which is 19th century speak for we're in charge now, and we're going to borrow everything forever. Even the famous Rosetta Stone, the one that cracked the code of hieroglyphs, was taken by the British after Napoleon's defeat. It now resides in the British Museum, where it lives in quiet existential dread beside 87 other items labeled, loaned indefinitely. Back at the pyramids, graffiti piled up. The oldest known traveler's signature? A Roman tourist named Hadrianus from 124 CE, who apparently couldn't resist leaving a little note on the wall. Hadrianus was here, more or less. And then came the boom of the 20th century. Planes, buses, cruise ships. The pyramids became the backdrop for Hollywood. Adventure films and half the documentaries, narrated in dramatic British accents. They also became a kind of screen, onto which every generation projected its own ideas. Some saw pyramids as alien landing pads. Others believed they held magical energy fields. One popular theory claimed that razor blades stayed sharp longer if stored in a pyramid-shaped box. Spoiler, they didn't. Historians still debate whether these obsessions were about fascination or just projection, because when people look at the pyramids, they often see what they want: mystery, wisdom, cosmic alignment, or just a good Instagram shot. Even in modern times, the Great Pyramid is a magnet for interpretation. Some say it encodes the golden ratio. Others insist it aligns perfectly with Orion's belt. There are entire books arguing that the pyramid's internal shafts are actually star tunnels, or ventilation systems, or both, depending on who you ask. Meanwhile, local guides try to keep a straight face while telling tourists, "Yes, ma'am, the ancient Egyptians definitely invented alien Wi-Fi." But beneath all the theories, something lingers. The pyramid's scale still stuns. Its angles still whisper precision, and its purpose, though officially tomb, still feels unsettled, like a riddle refusing to close. You wander back to the edge of the chamber. Torchlight dims. Outside, the stars flicker in agreement. Maybe the point was never about being solved. Maybe the pyramid was always a mirror, reflecting whatever mysteries we brought with us. You sit down on a smooth block of limestone, your legs grateful for the pause. The pyramid walls seem to lean in just a little, like they're listening too. You stretch your back and let your mind drift to a question. Everyone eventually asks, why pyramids? Why this shape? Not domes. Not towers. Not cubes or ziggurats. Just triangles. Everywhere. Monolithic triangles that rise into the sky. Unwavering. Architects today will tell you the pyramid shape is structurally brilliant. It distributes weight perfectly. Each block rests slightly inward, leaning into the others like an eternal trust fall. That's how the Great Pyramid has survived earthquakes, looters, and TikTokers for over 4,000 years. But was that the reason? Or just a happy coincidence? Historians still debate whether the design was more symbolic than practical. To the ancient Egyptians, the pyramid may have represented the primeval mound, the first land to rise from the waters of chaos in their creation myth. That sacred hill called the Benben was a place of emergence, of divine awakening. A pyramid then was less a tomb than a ladder, a spiritual off-ramp to the stars. The sun god Ra was said to travel in a solar boat across the sky by day and into the underworld by night. Some believe the pyramid's angled sides were meant to catch that divine light, guiding the deceased pharaoh's soul upward, toward immortality, toward cosmic reunion. And then there's the math. Oh, the math. The Great Pyramid's proportions are almost too perfect. The base is square within inches. The sides slope at 51 degrees, oddly close to the angle needed to form a perfect golden triangle. If you multiply the height by PPI, you nearly get the pyramid's base perimeter. Coincidence? Lost technology? Or ancient Egyptians just really, really good at geometry? Modern conspiracy theorists, bless their hearts, often suggest aliens helped, because apparently it's easier to believe in aliens than accept that a Bronze Age civilization could master trigonometry without Wi-Fi. Still, one can't deny the awe of the thing, even stripped of its smooth white casing stones, which originally reflected sunlight so intensely you'd need shades. The pyramid is a marvel of precision and purpose. You picture it back in its prime, gleaming, radiant, glowing gold at the tip. The entrance sealed. The pharaoh inside, surrounded by treasures and scrolls, and the occasional curse tablet that probably just says no soliciting. You wonder if all that symmetry in stone was also meant to impose a kind of order on the universe. A message in stone: we are not chaos. We build meaning, even in death. Meanwhile, scholars in every era have tried to make sense of it, puzzling over blueprints, aligning maps with constellations, writing theories with increasingly stressed footnotes. Some believe the pyramids were observatories or astronomical calendars, or encrypted encyclopedias of sacred knowledge. Others just sigh and say, it's a big grave. Let it be. Then there are the tunnels. Deep within the pyramid are shafts, narrow, angled passageways that seem to lead nowhere. For decades, no one could explain them. Too small for people. Not quite aligned with anything obvious. Not even air vents. In the 1990s, robotic crawlers were sent up those shafts, like little space rovers armed with cameras. One found a tiny stone door with copper handles. Another discovered what might be an unexplored chamber. Historians still argue whether these are symbolic pathways for the soul or just architectural quirks meant to relieve pressure. Because even in their deepest mysteries, pyramids manage to keep things, shall we say, opaque. And let's not forget the casing stones. Back in the Old Kingdom, the Great Pyramid was coated with smooth Tura limestone, polished so finely that the entire structure would shimmer like a beacon. Some ancient texts describe it reflecting the sun, so brightly that it could be seen for miles. Imagine seeing that emerge over the desert horizon, a gleaming mountain of light. No wonder travelers were overwhelmed. Today, most of those casing stones are gone, quarried off centuries ago to build mosques and palaces in nearby Cairo. But a few remain at the base, whispering of what once was. You run your hand across the rough limestone near you and try to picture it. That blinding monument, untouched by time, perfect in its lines, glinting in the sun like a divine mirror. Some say it wasn't built to last. Others believe it was the very definition of permanence. But even permanence erodes. Sand blows, stones fall, dynasties collapse. And yet the shape remains. Pyramids don't just stand tall. They endure quietly, immune to our modern impatience. They wait unbothered by your hot takes or your hashtags. They are the original read receipt, seen by time but not replying. You find yourself walking once more, this time down a narrow shaft deep within the pyramid. The air is cool and dry, like a stone library that forgot it held secrets. Every footstep echoes, then disappears into the silence, as if the pyramid swallows even sound. It's time now to ask, who really built these things? The myths abound. Slaves, aliens, lost Atlanteans with blueprint apps. But if you scratch beneath the limestone, history has a quieter, sturdier answer. The workers who built the pyramids were not slaves in chains, whipped under a boiling sun. That image, popularized by Hollywood epics and overly dramatic school textbooks, simply doesn't hold up. Instead, archaeologists now believe the builders were skilled laborers, seasonal crews, rotating in and out, fed well, housed in nearby workers' villages, even buried with honors when they died. In 1990, tombs of pyramid workers were discovered, simple but respectful, close to the Giza Plateau. They weren't unpaid. They weren't prisoners. They were citizens, farmers during the Nile's flood season when fields were underwater, What better way to pass the time than to move 2.5-ton blocks uphill with 10,000 of your closest sweaty friends? Historians still argue whether these workers saw their efforts as a job or a divine duty. Imagine you're one of them. You rise before the sun, eat a meal of bread and onions, maybe drink a little beer, yes, beer rations were a thing, and join your team. You haul limestone. You chant with others to keep rhythm. Sometimes you joke. Sometimes you curse. Your hands bleed. Your back aches. And at night, you stare up at the stars and wonder if what you're building will outlive you by centuries. It will. But it won't have your name on it. You'll be one of thousands, anonymous but essential, like scaffolding made of flesh and willpower. No monument carved for you, but every block you raised was a kind of legacy. There's quiet pride in that. And then there's the engineering, the logistics. You know how hard it is to organize a dinner party with 6 people? Now imagine organizing tens of thousands of workers, sourcing millions of limestone and granite blocks, planning transport from quarries, coordinating tools, labor shifts, food rations, and burial procedures for the builders who didn't make it. And yet they did it. Over 20 years, the Great Pyramid of Giza rose like a man-made mountain. One estimate suggests it took about 340 stones placed per day. That's one every few minutes, dawn to dusk, with no modern cranes, no steel tools, just levers, ramps, sledges, and an astounding sense of shared purpose. Some think the key was wetting the sand in front of sleds, reducing friction. Others suggest internal spiral ramps within the pyramid. Theories bloom like desert flowers and fade just as fast. But here's the oddest thing. No detailed blueprint has ever been found. It's as if the knowledge was passed down through generations of master builders, word by word, gesture by gesture, like a dance so ingrained no one needed to write the steps. And so it was built layer by layer, line by line, without concrete or computers, but not without vision. You reach a chamber now, empty but for echoes. A low ceiling, walls that seem to hum with history. It's tempting to romanticize it all, to imagine noble artisans humming spiritual songs as they carved sacred blocks. But maybe some days were just boring. Maybe they argued about whose ox smelled worse. Maybe someone dropped a chisel and got teased about it for a week. Maybe some guy named Menhotep always showed up late and brought stale bread. The human part, messy, grumbling, determined, matters too. Because while we often admire pyramids as objects of wonder, we forget they were built by real people with cracked fingers, sunburned necks, and stories that never made it into hieroglyphs. Their greatest monument? Not just stone, but cooperation. A structure so absurdly ambitious, so breathtakingly impractical by today's standards, that it could only have been built by people who believed in the afterlife, in the divine, in Pharaoh, in the future, or maybe just in getting the job done before the next flood season. You sit on a low block now, worn smooth by time and tourists, and feel the hum of that belief still echoing, still here, still astonishing. You follow the sound of your own footsteps deeper into the pyramid's heart, and the air changes again, cooler, stiller, and tinged with the dusty scent of stone that's held its breath for 4,000 years. The corridor opens into a chamber empty, echoing and oddly underwhelming. This was supposed to be the tomb? You were promised treasures. Golden thrones, booby traps, maybe a snake pit or two, but all you see is a stone box. Where is the mummy? That's the thing. For all the grandeur of these tombs, many of the pyramids, including the most famous ones, have never yielded an actual royal body. The Great Pyramid of Giza? Empty. Not a single pharaoh. Not even a pharaoh's favorite cat. So either grave robbers were unnervingly efficient, or the pharaohs pulled the world's most elaborate vanishing act. Historians still argue whether these pyramids were ever actually used as burial chambers at all. Some suggest they were symbolic tombs, cosmic launch pads, if you will, for the pharaoh's soul, not his body. Others insist the burials happened, but the real chamber is still hidden, maybe behind sealed walls or deep beneath the pyramid's foundations. But here's what we do know. By the time archaeologists showed up, most pyramids had been emptied, looted in ancient times, perhaps within centuries or even decades of completion. Imagine being the ancient Egyptian equivalent of a night security guard and realizing your job is to protect a royal tomb from your fellow countrymen. With no surveillance cameras, no steel doors, and only the occasional scorpion as backup. Tomb robbery was such a problem that later, dynasties stopped building pyramids. Altogether. Too obvious. Too tempting. Instead, they began hiding tombs in remote valleys, carving them into cliffs, hence the famous Valley of the Kings. Out of sight, out of plunder. But the pyramids remained, towering like giant name tags in the desert. So why keep building something that just screamed, "Hey, loot me"? Because maybe the pyramid wasn't about the body at all. Maybe the true purpose was the structure itself, the sheer, ludicrous ambition of building something immortal. The pyramid became the monument to an idea, that the pharaoh was not just a man, but a god in stone. The body might rot, the treasures might vanish, but the triangle stands. Of course, there are always theories. Alternative Egyptologists, those lovable chaos agents, propose everything from alien teleportation pads to ancient particle accelerators. You can't blame them. There's something eerie about how empty these chambers are. You picture an ancient architect, stroking his beard and thinking, "We'll hide the real burial site 10 chambers over. This one's just to confuse the grave robbers." And maybe it worked. Or maybe the empty chambers are exactly what they appear to be. Architectural. Cathedrals to nothing but absence. Still, even the absence whispers. There's the famous air shafts in the Great Pyramid. Tiny narrow channels leading out of the burial chamber, aligned with certain stars. Were they for ventilation? Symbolic passages for the soul? Stargazing tools? Pyramid-themed birdhouses? Nobody knows. You lie back now mentally, upon the cool stone floor of the king's chamber. There is no treasure, no mummy, just granite slabs placed so precisely they hum with silence. The ceiling looms above, stacked with massive blocks to distribute the weight. It's not just architecture, it's choreography, stone performing a quiet ballet over your head. And still, no pharaoh. Some believe the body was hidden, then moved, then lost. Others claim we've been looking in the wrong pyramid altogether. There's even a theory that the builder of the Great Pyramid, Pharaoh Khufu, was never buried there at all. That the pyramid was a cenotaph, a spiritual placeholder. It's the architectural equivalent of building your own empty coffin and saying, "Don't worry, I'll figure out the details later." And maybe Khufu did. But centuries passed, dynasties fell, and sand swallowed the answers. So now we stand millennia later, staring into empty chambers, wondering not just where the bodies went, but why we're so obsessed with finding them. Perhaps it's human nature. We want closure. If someone built a 1,000-ton tomb, we expect it to deliver on the packaging. Yet here we are lying on metaphorical granite, soothed by the idea that not every mystery has to be solved. Maybe the pyramid's genius lies in the blank space, the unsaid, the body-shaped silence that invites us to fill it with stories. You let out a slow breath. No mummy, no sarcophagus, just geometry, gravity, and the sound of your own heartbeat in a stone that doesn't care whether it's understood. And that somehow feels enough. You stay still for a moment longer, listening to the pyramid breathe. Or maybe that's just you, tired and tranquil, with ancient questions swirling in your half-sleeping brain. But we're not done yet. Because pyramids weren't just empty tombs or oversized spiritual origami. They were also monuments to math, precision, symmetry, and measurements so accurate they make modern tape measures sweat nervously. Take the Great Pyramid of Giza again, built over 4,500 years ago, yet its base is almost perfectly square. The average error in length? About the width of your thumbnail. Try building a shed that straight, without a laser level, while wearing a linen kilt in the desert. Historians still argue whether the builders had advanced tools, or just an obsessive attention to detail. The stones, some weighing over 80 tons, were hauled, stacked, and aligned with cardinal directions. so precisely that conspiracy theorists start foaming at the mouth. It gets better. The pyramid's height and perimeter seem to encode the number pi. Coincidence? Or the ancient Egyptians quietly inventing math tourism? You begin to suspect these people didn't just build pyramids. They weaponized geometry. And yet somehow the real marvel isn't the math, it's the manpower. Tens of thousands of workers, over decades quarrying, shaping, and dragging stones across the desert. Modern myth likes to imagine slaves whipped beneath the sun, but archaeology suggests otherwise. Many workers were well fed, housed nearby, and even honored in death. Think of it more like a national infrastructure project with excellent snacks. You can picture it now. A supervisor checking angles, muttering to his assistant, "No, Khufu wants this side aligned with Orion's belt. Not the Big Dipper, you dolt." The stars were everything. The pyramid wasn't just for Earth, it was for eternity. Many believe it was a symbolic resurrection machine, helping the pharaoh's soul ascend and take its place among the constellations. There's poetry in that, and also in the fact that, despite everything, the pyramids are silent. They don't boast, they just exist. Quiet, impenetrable, immune to time, sand, and interpretive dance documentaries. Still we dig. With satellite imagery, thermal scans, and tiny robot rovers, we want to know what's inside the unexcavated chambers, what's behind the sealed doors. If there's one last sarcophagus waiting to surprise us with a creak and a dust puff. One scan in 2017 even revealed a mysterious void inside. The Great Pyramid, roughly the size of a passenger plane. No one knows what's in it. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. A hidden burial room, a symbolic passage, an ancient Egyptian broom closet, and still no one's dared to break in. Because despite our technology, our curiosity, our clickbait headlines, we hesitate. Because maybe deep down we like not knowing. The mystery is part of the magic. And so you, like every seeker before you, must content yourself with the outside, the perfect angles, the whispering corridors, the math carved into limestone, and the knowledge that someone, 1,000 years ago, looked up at the stars, picked up a chisel and said, "Let's build something forever." You blink slowly. The candlelight in your imagined chamber flickers. You can almost hear the rustle of linen robes, the soft thud of stone on stone, the murmur of prayers whispered to the sky. It's not the treasures that matter. It's not even the tomb. It's the stillness. The pyramid teaches patience, scale, silence. And you, tucked into a blanket, mind wandering across millennia, finally begin to understand what it means to rest in peace. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. Stillness. That's what the pyramid has taught you. Not just silence, but a silence shaped with intent. Designed, measured, layered block by block, to last beyond sandstorms, dynasties, even you. You shift slightly on your imaginary stone bench. Your pyramid tour is almost over now, but not before one final mystery. What do you do with a monument that won't stop existing? The Great Pyramid has been standing for 45 centuries. Its neighbors, the pyramids of Khafra and Menkaure, are close behind. Together, they've outlived empires. Earthquakes, colonizers, Napoleon's graffiti-loving troops, and countless theories about alien contractors. They were once brilliantly smooth, sheathed in polished white limestone casing stones that shimmered in the sun. Travelers said they could be seen from miles away, like light beacons for the dead. But most of those casing stones were taken long ago, recycled into mosques, palaces, and Cairo's city walls. The outer glamour is gone, but the core, still intact, still standing. And even now people visit, not to solve the mystery, necessarily, but to feel it. Because the pyramids don't just contain history, they radiate it. You close your eyes. You imagine workers dragging sledges under a rising sun, architects measuring the stars, priests chanting in the inner chambers, a pharaoh's voice echoing somewhere deep asking, "Did I build forever?" And maybe he did, because even now in a quiet room, someone across the world dreams of pyramids, while falling asleep to a video with crackling fire sounds and a mildly sarcastic narrator. So let's drift back, out of the sandy corridors, past the false doors and hidden shafts, back across the Nile with stars twinkling overhead. You step into the night, a little more ancient, a little more patient. The pyramid fades behind you, but its weight lingers in your chest, a weight not of stone but of awe. And now it's time to sleep. You're floating now. No more corridors, no more sand under your sandals, just quiet. The kind of quiet that settles into your limbs, where thoughts slow down to a gentle hum, and the night wraps around you like linen bandages, soft and weightless. The desert has gone still. Above, the stars don't blink, they breathe, each one an ancient torch flickering behind a veil of time. Somewhere a wind brushes the dunes into soft ripples, not loud enough to wake even a jackal. Closer now, you feel your breath. It mirrors the long rhythm of the Nile, slow and inevitable. In out, like stone being carved, like stories being remembered. The pyramid is behind you, but its silence is here. It lingers in your chest, a reminder that not all mysteries need solving. Some are meant to be admired, or simply shared in a whispered bedtime story. You're safe here. The night is long but kind. Let your thoughts drift like dust over desert rock. Let your breath carry you like a reed boat through warm darkness. No more riddles, no more timelines. Only calm, only sleep. And somewhere far off a single candle still flickers, guarding the tomb of forgotten kings, and the dreams of those lucky enough to wander their halls in imagination. Good night, traveler. Sleep deep, dream like a pharaoh, sweet dreams.